Hi, I'm Ruben Saltzman with Structure Tech Home Inspections, and today's topic is dryer duct safety. So as a home inspector, we constantly find problems with dryer duct installations, and they go in our inspection reports. Today, I'm going to cover some of the most common things that we as home inspectors report on, and I'm going to frequently reference the Minnesota State Mechanical Code, which talks about how dryer ducts are supposed to be installed. Specifically, it all comes out of Section 504 of the Minnesota Code. Now, if you're in other parts of the country, you don't use the Minnesota Code, you probably use the International Residential Code, also known as the IRC, and Section 1502 of the IRC just about mirrors the Minnesota State Mechanical Code. There are some very subtle differences between the two, but I've read them, compared them side by side. They're nearly identical. So let's dig into it. Hold on. Before I get into all the details of a dryer duct, I need to do a quick definition here. The difference between a dryer duct and a transition duct. They're two different things. A dryer duct is the thing that conveys the exhaust from a clothes dryer to the exterior. The dryer transition duct is what gets you from the dryer to your duct. It can be made out of corrugated stuff. It could be this flexible foil stuff. It could be this semi-rigid flexible foil stuff. There's a bunch of different materials that can make up the dryer transition duct. You can have up to 8 feet of that material, and it can be flexible. It needs to be UL listed. There's a special listing. I'm not going to get into all the details, but there's a UL listing that it needs to have. And it can't pass through any building partitions. You can't go through floors, through walls, through any concealed areas. It's just right in the same room. That's a dryer transition duct. So, need to define that real quickly before we talk about all the different requirements for the duct itself. And we'll talk about transition ducts too. But one thing that all of the codes require, this is not just a Minnesota thing, the national codes require it too, is that the dryer needs a vent to the exterior. The only exception is if you have a condensing dryer, but that's another animal. If you have a traditional clothes dryer, it needs to vent to the exterior. Now, I know that there are these UL listed products you can buy at the store, like this thing here, where it's this recovery type of deal, where if you have an electric dryer, it says vent electric dryers to the interior. It's basically this water trap where it traps all the lint and you recoup all of the heat and moisture and it goes back into your home. These are bad news. I do not recommend these. It's not just a Minnesota problem. This is anywhere in the country. If you're using one of these, you are dumping a ton of bad air into your home. It's a ton of moisture. If we see those during home inspections, we recommend having them removed and having the dryers vented directly to the exterior. And it just so happens that that's what the national and Minnesota building codes require. So, dryers need to vent to the exterior. Next, let's talk about some of the rules for the dryer duct. Number one, you need to have a smooth interior. This means you can't use any of this corrugated stuff for the duct. It needs to be made out of steel, and on all of the connections, you can't use screws. You can't have stuff that penetrates it and then protrudes into the duct. Now in Minnesota, they specifically say no screws at all. In the national code, I believe they say you can't protrude more than like 1/8 of an inch into the duct, which essentially means you can't use screws. What you can use to connect it is a special type of tape. Not duct tape. This, traditional duct tape, even though it has the word duct right in there, you can't use this for the connections. I mean, we see people do it, but it's not the right material. What should be used is this UL listed tape, and it's going to be, it says listed 824P. What the code actually says is 181A or 181B. It's going to have 181 in there. It's kind of tough to tell on this stuff, but this is foil tape. If you're going to use this stuff, I should have had this ready here. Basically, it's going to have a paper back, and you separate the two, and it looks like this. There are two different types of foil tape. There's the plain Jane stuff that costs $10 for a roll, And then there's the UL listed stuff that costs 20 bucks for a roll. And you know, don't take my numbers as gospel. I'm just estimating here. It's about twice as expensive for the UL listed stuff. You can even buy smaller rolls. This stuff, I was just at Home Depot the other day, and it says right on the roll, dryer vent installation, as though there's some special tape for dryer vents. It's not meant just for dryer ducts. It's just clever packaging. This is a much smaller roll than this huge one that I've got. It's a little bit skinnier, but it's the same material. It's got the same listing. Whatever it is, that stuff is fine. There's a special mastic that could be used, but just no screws. Don't use duct tape. Use some good foil tape. That's how to get those joints proper. Next, let's see. And I got to look at my notes here because I got a lot of notes. The maximum length of the duct. Manufacturers will give you the requirements in their manual, but the code is very restrictive. The code says you can only have up to 35 feet of dryer duct, and that does not include the transition duct, the corrugated thing to get to the duct. That's not counted in any calculation. It's basically the duct itself. They say 35 feet, and for every elbow, you got to subtract X number of feet. There's all these calculations you got to do, but that's what the code says. They say you can go up to 35 feet, or you can use the manufacturer's instructions. And every manufacturer I've ever looked at gives you way more than 35 feet. For instance, I did a quick search and I looked up Maytag, LG, Kenmore, and Samsung, and their maximum lengths respectively were 64, 65, 64, and 80 feet. So they all allowed about twice what the code allows. And that's perfectly fine. They've designed their dryer to run this way. As a home inspector, if I see a dryer duct that's 50 feet long, and I should say 50 equivalent feet, subtracting maybe 5 feet for every elbow, it's probably fine. I don't need to get whipped up about it. The only time I would write it up in my report, I'd be concerned about it, is if it went a really long distance and I looked up the manufacturer's instructions and I verified exactly what they required, and I thought, this is way too much. So, for the most part, dryer duct length is not a big deal. It's not frequently violated. But if I see a bunch of turns all over the place, I would be concerned about that. Okay, next one is the size of the duct. You get 4 inches. That's it. The dryer duct size shall be no larger, no smaller than 4 inches. You get smaller, and you have a reduction in airflow. You get larger, and you get a reduction in velocity. And that could lead to clogged up lint. And you know, when I talk about a reduction in velocity, a simple experiment here. I got my little straw, my little spitball. There, shoots right out of there. Let's try that's a 4-inch dryer duct. Works really well. Let's try a 6-inch dryer duct. Not quite the same. You get it? Huge reduction in velocity. That's why dryer ducts need to be 4 inches. You might think bigger is better, not in this case. Next, no screens allowed at the dryer terminal. We've seen this done many times on new construction because you get these terminals and they can be used for either a dryer duct or a bathroom exhaust fan. And if someone's not paying attention, they'll just put the same terminal on. It comes with the screen, and after less than a year, those things get totally clogged. This is a shot of a 11-month warranty inspection I was doing on a new build. Already, the dryer screen was completely clogged, and the homeowners were complaining of hot, damp clothes that would never dry. And the fix was remove the screen. I kindly did that for them. There was no extra charge on the inspection for this one. And finally, let's just touch on dryer transition ducts briefly. I already talked about some of the rules. I said that they need to be in the same room. You can't pass through concealed spaces, maximum of 8 feet long. You can't connect a transition duct to another transition duct. It just needs to be one piece. The connections ought to be made with that foil tape that I was showing you earlier. And they need to be UL 2158A listed. And let's look at some examples here. This one, this is beautiful. This is a listed transition duct. It is 2 feet long, 4 inches, and it says right on here, 2158A. Oh boy, my camera's not focusing. I guess you're gonna have to take my word for it. That's what it says. It's UL listed, and when I pull this stuff out, this stuff is really solid. I mean, this is beefy material. There's some other stuff you can find at the store that looks really similar. It's hard to tell the difference, but you stretch this stuff out, and look, just as I was stretching it out, my thumb just smushed into there. I just dented the heck out of this. This stuff is not beefy and strong. However, as a home inspector, it's kind of tough for me to tell the difference between these two. I don't get super whipped up trying to determine, is this actually UL listed or not? Because of a lot of the time, I can't even see the UL listing. If I see semi-rigid, corrugated metal, I'm okay with it. Another thing I am okay with, and this is going to surprise people, is this foil stuff. This stuff is UL listed. I know a lot of home inspectors get super whipped up about this, and they're like, oh, it's going to start a fire, it's a fire hazard. Based on what? The code does allow this. There are a few manufacturers who don't like this stuff. I don't try to make it my business to figure out which manufacturer allows this and which one doesn't. I don't think it's the best product. If for my own home, I would much prefer to have something like this. It's going to be much more resistant to a fire burning through it. Even better than that is a product called Dryer Flex. I've blogged and done videos about that independently. I'm not going to cover it in detail here, but I'll try to put a link to some of those videos in this post. Bottom line is, as long as the dryer transition duct is made from a proper material and we have a short length, as short as possible, you don't have this huge corrugated section coiled up around the floor, I'm cool with it. And that can happen. I was at the store the other day and I found this very unfortunate product. This stuff says Flex Foil Duct, ideal for gas and electric dryer applications. And it is 25 feet long and it's UL listed. It's got a UL listing on there. Look at that. What's it listed to? Not as a dryer transition duct at 25 feet. I don't know what this is supposed to be for. Not only that, but if it's used for a kitchen fan, kitchen fans are always 6 inches. I've never seen one that's 4, and kitchen fans are supposed to have, never mind. I'm getting into another topic. It's not a great product. Bottom line is, I don't know what people are using, if it's UL listed or not. As long as we see a short length of it, and it looks identical to a product that is UL listed, I'm cool with it. I just don't want to see plastic. Okay, that wraps up my talk on dryer transition ducts and dryer duct safety. That covers all of the most common stuff that we as home inspectors find and write up and make recommendations for improvement on. I'm Ruben Saltzman with Structure Tech Home Inspections. Thanks for watching. Take care.